All right, I know this news is kind of 3 days old and nothing really happened, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway because we're dealing with a woman who thought about ending HYBE and Bang Seok back in February 2024, 1 year before BTS returns from military service, because she thought that was when HYBE was at its weakest. And that woman is Hee-jin. So on May 30th, Source Music and Hee-jin faced off again in court with the second hearing of their lawsuit. Now, this second hearing was supposed to happen on March 14th, but then Source Music requested that they delay the hearing to May 30th because on March 14th, Le Seraphim, Source Music's artist, had a comeback with the album called Hot. So, what happened then on May 30th? Basically, nothing because of what Hee-jin's side argued. All right, so let me read you and translate you this article that nicely summed up what happened in court. And later on, I will also go through some context about this court case and some questions that Hee-jin's side should be answering. And then, yeah. All right, so let's start here. On May 30th, the 12th Civil Division of the Seoul Western District Court held a second hearing in the lawsuit filed by Source Music against Hee-jin, seeking approximately 500 million won in damages. Only the legal representatives of both sides attended the session, so Hee-jin wasn't there in person. Source Music came prepared with a 20-minute presentation, but right before the hearing began, Hee-jin's legal team argued that the KakaoTalk messages included as evidence had been obtained illegally and therefore should not be admissible, requesting the hearing be held privately. I wonder what other KakaoTalk messages is she worried about? The court explained. The defendant, Hee-jin's side, expressed concern that some of the evidence submitted in advance may have been obtained through actions that could be criminally punishable and requested a closed hearing for that reason. The plaintiff, that is Source Music, in turn submitted a procedural objection to this request. On whether the KakaoTalk messages could be accepted as evidence, the judge said, based on the material submitted by both sides, it's difficult to determine whether the messages in question were obtained through actions that could lead to criminal punishment. If the defendant's claims are valid, the evidence might be inadmissible. The court continued, we will reserve judgment on the specific parts the defendant is challenging. If later arguments provide enough support for their admissibility, we will decide then whether to accept or reject them. For now, the hearing will be held publicly, but we will limit discussion of the specific private messages the defendant is objecting to. While we can't stop them from raising the issue, we will restrict arguments involving claims that the private messages were obtained illegally. Okay, I'm gonna go through these points later, but for now, let's read the article. Hee-jin's side responded, if today's presentation goes ahead, we're most concerned that the messages involved in the case might be included in the slides. The court told Source Music, if you need to redo the presentation without the content, we can reschedule the hearing. Source Music countered, this same issue has already come up in another case, and the evidence was accepted there. If the defendant wanted to raise an objection, they had ample opportunity to do so. To cancel at the last minute because the presentation isn't ready, this seems questionable from the plaintiff's perspective. The court concluded, we inform both parties that we will further review materials related to how the KakaoTalk messages were obtained before deciding whether to admit them as evidence. For today's hearing, we will proceed with all other matters except the parts involving the disputed messages. No arguments quoting or referencing those KakaoTalk messages will be allowed. Source Music reiterated, the messages were not obtained illegally. Even when emails are exchanged, if it's done on company equipment, it's not considered private. In this case, company devices were involved and prior consent for data collection had been given. It's not as if someone secretly took a phone and extracted the messages. They added, we will wait for the court's decision on the evidence before proceeding with the presentation. In the end, the court asked whether both sides agreed to postpone the hearing until a decision is made regarding the admissibility of the messages. Both parties agreed, and the hearing was rescheduled for June 27th. So, there you go. The article was kind of confusing, so let's go over one more time. So Minijin's legal team essentially argued that the KakaoTalk messages were illegally obtained, thus inadmissible. And the types of KakaoTalk messages that we're talking about are, these kind of stuff that we already had access to thanks to various Korean media agency articles, right? Where are those? Like these, For example, conversations between So Sung-jin, the CEO of Source Music, and Minijin back in 2021, and conversations between Minijin and the Shaman. So perhaps the KakaoTalk messages that were supposed to included in Source Music's presentations this time had something that the public didn't have access to. Who knows? But yeah, it's very obvious that, Minijin's side is kind of worried, right? And their legal team, Minijin's legal team, requested a closed hearing, citing privacy concerns and potential criminal implications of how the evidence was gathered. Now, for that, Source Music counter by saying that the messages were not secretly obtained, but rather collected through company devices. And they claim prior employee consent had been given. They also cited precedent. Similar evidence had already been accepted in a separate but related case. Now, regarding the messages not being secretly obtained, interestingly, last year, Lee Jin-ho, a YouTuber, had reported that Minijin has claimed that HYBE illegally extracted KakaoTalk messages from her work PC via forensic means, but it turned out that she herself sent those KakaoTalk files to a personal Gmail address. Okay, and if this is true, since Minijin personally sent the KakaoTalk files from a HYBE corporate device to a personal Gmail, it strengthens Source Music's position that the files were not stolen, and it weakens any privacy violation claim regarding unauthorized acquisition, right? And then of course the forensic allegation falls apart. If the files came from Minijin herself, HYBE may not have needed a forensic extraction at all, and her claim may now appear misleading or exaggerated to the court, right? So we'll have to see how Source Music proves that the messages were not secretly obtained. And the judge did not immediately reject or admit the evidence. Instead, they chose to withhold the ruling on the KakaoTalk evidence for now and proceed with other matters in open court and prohibit either party from referring to or quoting the disputed messages during the day's session on May 30th. Source Music, like I said, prepared a 20-minute presentation, likely referencing the messages, but Minijin's team objected preemptively before the session began, fearing, at least according to the article, fearing the slide, or according to themselves, fearing that the slides might contain disputed content. So the court offered to reschedule if Source Music needed time to edit the presentation. So let's talk about their strategies. Obviously, Minijin's side focused heavily on limiting the scope of admissible evidence, and they highlighted data privacy and criminal implications, possibly to discredit Source Music's evidence outright. And by pushing for a closed hearing, they may also aim to reduce media exposure of the alleged conversations. And we have seen again and again how, all Hee-jin has been doing is to delay the court hearings and legal cases as much as possible. What about Source Music's strategy? They leaned on procedural and precedent-based arguments, and they tried to frame Hee-jin's objections as tactical delays, noting that there was enough time to raise concerns earlier. As I told you, this hearing was supposed to happen on March 14th, and then it already got delayed by more than 2 months. It makes sense that they had enough time to prepare. And Source Music also emphasized that the communication was done on a company-owned devices, implying it was work-related and not private. And, the KakaoTalk messages are at the center of this case. So if they're deemed inadmissible, the strength of Source Music's claim could weaken. And the court's decision on admissibility is pending, and they will determine where how much of the case proceeds. At the next hearing, like I said, is set for June 27th, where the court may revisit the evidence question and potentially allow Source Music's presentation, PT presentation. But again, if it's true that it was Hee-jin herself who sent these KakaoTalk messages to a third party through Gmail through a corporate device, then it is quite likely that these messages could be used as evidence, right? Now, let's talk about some context, okay? So back in July 2024, that was when Source Music filed a damages lawsuit worth approximately 500 million Korean won against Hee-jin, citing defamation, obstruction of business, and insult. Okay? And in the complaint, Source Music stated that Hee-jin's claim during her first press conference on April 25th, 2024, specifically allegations that HYBE sabotaged Hee-jin's debut were false. And the company, Source Music, pointed to several specific claims as defamatory. That Hee-jin personally cast all the Hee-jin's members, that HYBE had promised to debut Hee-jin's as his first girl group, but broke that promise unilaterally, and that Source Music neglected the Hee-jin's members. The first hearing was held on January 10th, 2025, earlier this year. Hee-jin did not appear in person. Only the legal representatives of Source Music and Hee-jin attended, just like the second hearing. Now, during the session, Source Music's legal team explained why the lawsuit had been filed. The defendant publicly damaged the plaintiff's credibility by making statements in a nationally broadcast press conference. While there may be several points of contention, statements such as calling us 양아치, thugs, clearly cross into territory that requires legal judgment. They also added, as for the false claim about casting, Hee-jin's has 5 members. Minji, for instance, was cast by Source Music in 2018 and trained for several years. Hani was cast through a global audition organized by HYBE and Source Music. While the defendant may have contributed ideas during the process, she did not hold any authority to make casting decisions. They also argued that even for the remaining members, it was Source Music, not Hee-jin, who cast them. And, the submitted evidence does not support her claim that she personally cast the entire group. Regarding the group's debut process, Source Music stated, the role assigned to the defendant upon joining was branding. Remember, Hee-jin was the CBO, Chief Branding Officer. Things like naming and visual concept development. But she continuously delayed those responsibilities, which in turn delayed the debut. As for the claim of neglect, the extensive training provided by Source Music is precisely what made it possible for Hee-jin to debut as idols just 8 months after being transferred to ADOR. Now, in response, at the time, Hee-jin's side argued The overall concept and vision for New Jeans were planned by Hee-jin, and the final member lineup was also her choice. That's interesting, given the fact that she heavily relied on the shaman for the final lineup. Remember? Is it here? Yeah, right here. Yeah. But yeah, they said that the final lineup was also her choice. From the perspective of New Jeans members and their parents, it would have been disheartening to see Le Sserafim debut first when they had believed New Jeans would be HYBE's first girl group. Knowing that it would be difficult for New Jeans to debut after Le Sserafim, Hee-jin took the members to ADOR and debuted them there. So that was Hee-jin's legal team's argument during the first hearing. Hee-jin's side maintained that given this background, her statements during the press conference did not constitute defamation or insults. They were neither false nor slanderous in nature. All right. Now, I believe that, with this article that Dispatch released back in July of 2024, so last year, it was an exclusive article. I feel like, I don't know, there are several questions that Hee-jin would have to answer. And the question is, did she really steal New Jeans from Source Music? And I have talked about this Dispatch article last year in this video. When did I upload this? 8 months ago. And I have also fully translated the article, including the KakaoTalk messages, and I uploaded them on Patreon. So if you're interested, come check it out. So yeah, that question, whether Hee-jin actually stole New Jeans from Source Music, is at the center of this controversy, right? Especially after the private conversations between Hee-jin and the shaman were released by Dispatch. And while Hee-jin, of course, denies all allegations and calls these evidence baseless, Dispatch report painted a different picture. So the article was released on when was it? July 23rd, right? And they published detailed claims that in 2021, Hee-jin allegedly pulled New Jeans. And the team was then known as Team N, or N Team. And she allegedly pulled New Jeans out of Source Music and debuted them under her own label, ADOR. Now, Dispatch, backed up the report with internal chats, project role documents, R&R, and even transcripts of private conversations between Hee-jin and the shaman. And the key points were that Team N was originally a Source Music project planned since 2018 to debut in Q3 of 2021. Hee-jin joined HYBE as CBO in 2019 and became the creative director for Team N, in charge of visual branding and concepting. Source Music handled casting, training, management, and music, while Hee-jin was supposed to focus on branding. Now, over time, Hee-jin requested expanded authority over music and performance, and her role was expanded across, 4 revisions. Source Music claimed that Hee-jin repeatedly delayed meetings and project decisions for over a month at a time. These delays led HYBE to debut Le Sserafim, which was known as Team S at the time. So such delays led HYBE to debut Le Sserafim in early 2022 instead of Team N, that is New Jeans. Now, in a recorded private conversation, Hee-jin allegedly said she wanted to take Team N away from Source Music to her own label. And the shaman encouraged her to do so, saying HYBE was going to debut Team S anyway. Now, these chats have intensified suspicion that Hee-jin had long planned to take New Jeans and distance them from Source Music. Now, of course, once again, Hee-jin denies the allegations, and at the time, last year, she even said that she was going to take legal action against Dispatch, claiming that the report is based on like cherry-picked, misleading private messages, and that Dispatch illegally leaked pre-debut videos of NewJeans members, and she insisted that the conversations were private and personal, not evidence of wrongdoing. Now, to my knowledge, she never sued Dispatch, except if I remember correctly, Team Bunnies like reported something Dispatch to a government like institution. But I haven't heard of a legal case between Dispatch and Hee-jin for having revealed these KakaoTalk messages. Now, Source Music's lawsuit accuses Hee-jin of defamation and spreading false claims that HYBE delayed NewJeans' debut or mistreated them, right? And, I feel like this report by Dispatch and what we have seen so far challenge Hee-jin's core narrative that she rescued NewJeans from corporate negligence. If these materials released by Dispatch are proven authentic and credible, they could really undermine Hee-jin's legal and public position. And also the Shaman's involvement raises further questions about decision making at ADOR when Hee-jin was a CEO, and whether professional boundaries were crossed, right? So here's where things stand. The court has postponed its decision on whether the KakaoTalk messages can be used as evidence until June 27th. If Hee-jin did in fact send those files herself, that could seriously weaken her claims about illegal data extraction. And meanwhile, I personally believe that the Dispatch report continues to cast a long shadow, raising deeper questions about who really created NewJeans and whether the public's been getting the full story. So, what do you think? Is Source Music finally setting the record straight? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if there's more updates about this case, I will make videos accordingly. And yeah, you're free to have conversations, communications, discussions about this case. But let's stay positive, respectful, and classy as always. All right, see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace and love. Bye-bye.